Jerry, are we ready to go?
He was just
For like a half a minute.
Okay.
1,000. He can get married.
Okay.
take some time.
I don't know that my watch is necessarily perfectly correct, but
You ready? I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of August 5th, 2015. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you're parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, it is open and no parking coupons are necessary. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. If you are here to attend the Planning Commission briefing on the review of the wind energy rules and regulations, this will be held immediately following a brief break after today's regular meeting. Planning Commission action today is final on the following item 1.3. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council by filing a notice of appeal with the city clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business relates to the upcoming election of the Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair, and a request to amend the rules to delay the election of these officers for a 2-year term to the September 2nd, 2015 meeting. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Cornelius?
Second. Harris.
Thank you. Please call the vote.
Cornelius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Sunderman?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
The next item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on July 22nd, 2015. May I have a motion?
So moved. Cornelius?
Second. Weber. Go ahead. Excuse me.
Thank you. Call the vote, please.
Cornelius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Sunderman?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Have to leave.
Yep. Dennis. The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there's a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes. Please note that Commissioner Shear has declared a conflict of interest on consent agenda item 1.2, special permit number 15041. First consent agenda item is item 1.1, comprehensive plan conformance number 15008, to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln-Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan and application to declare property as surplus generally located on North 14th and North 15th Streets between Claremont Street and Court Street. Next item is item 1.2, special permit number 15041, to allow for an early childhood care facility, including a waiver to the conversion plan on property generally located at 8120 O Street. The next item is item 1.3, special permit number 15042, to allow for a 60-foot tall temporary wireless facility with waivers to co-location and screening on property generally located at 905 North 9th Street. And this is final action on special permit 15042 unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on the consent agenda items?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any item on the consent agenda? If so, please stand and state that item.
Don't see anyone. Should we call the motion?
Entertain a motion.
Entertain a motion?
Move approval. Cornelius?
Second, Harris.
Okay, Cornelius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Shear? Or, I'm sorry, he's abstaining?
Yep.
Sunderman?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0 with one abstention.
We're going to wait for Dennis to come back. We'll now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak, unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, will you call the first public hearing item?
Yes. Item 4.1 is Comprehensive Plan Amendment Number 15002 to amend the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan by changing the commercial center designation from O, mixed-use office center, to N, neighborhood center for a mixed-use development on property generally located in the northwest corner of South 70th Street and Yankee Hill Road. Staff recommendation is for approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
I see none.
Good afternoon, Brandon Garrett, Planning Department. What we have before you today is a kind of land use change that you don't typically see, so let me explain that a little bit. As you all know, our comprehensive plan has a future land use map, and we have designations such as residential and commercial, for example. In this particular case, we also have a centers map, a future centers map, where we define and designate what the future type of center will be. The application before us today is to change the future designation from mixed-use office to neighborhood center, and that is roughly located at South 70th and Yankee Hill Road. The applicant is also here if you have some specific questions about maybe their future plans. As I mentioned in the staff report, we do not have a proposed use permit or PUD that would go along with this, so we don't have any sort of comments or ideas as to what may occur here. The definition of a mixed-use office center would allow up to around 250,000 square feet, primarily in office uses, but would also allow some retail. That kind of flipping that now into a neighborhood center would allow more retail, obviously, but a smaller center size, more around 150,000 square feet, unless they decide to pursue the incentive criteria, which would allow them to increase up to 225,000 square feet. Now, typically, even if it's a neighborhood center with a large focus on retail, you will often see office uses and other support type uses in there. So in some ways, either way, there was going to be a mix of office and retail. And with the uncertainty in commercial real estate in general, and perhaps the weaker office market, as it was explained to us, that it may be appropriate at this time to change it to a neighborhood center as requested. That may reduce the land area possibly as this develops out when we do get a future plan. But what that could also allow is a little more mixing of uses in that land area, such as multifamily, townhomes, senior living, that sort of thing. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brandon? Thank you. Applicant?
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski. I'm appearing today on behalf of 1640 LLC and White LLC, who have an option to purchase this northwest corner at 70th and Yankee Hill Road. I think, as Brandon mentioned, we're requesting basically just a change in the designation on the comp plan from that mixed-use office to a neighborhood center. I think the staff report and Brandon did a pretty good job of explaining or laying out the facts as they exist. Since 2006, this has been shown as commercial property in the comp plan, so we're not changing that commercial designation. The request for the change today is really largely a function of the market and what my clients feel the market is and what it's going to be for this corner. I think you're aware over the last several years it's been a pretty soft suburban office market, and in fact I think we've had some of our areas that were designated for larger office centers with some O3 zoning, change uses. We've seen some apartments fill in and some of those type of things, which I think is just indicating the type of market we've got for suburban office. So I don't think there's any doubt office will continue to be mixed into this site. It's just a function of maybe the proportion of what will be office and what would be commercial. I think it's just the reality is that the more appropriate mix of uses we think that the market will support is probably a little more retail and with just the office mixed in, a little smaller percentage of office. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. There are no specific land use plans, but they're in the process of trying to actively market it. And so just even having the office designation with the uncertainty of whether, that could be changed or not could have an influence on the marketing, which is why we're asking for it to be changed up front.
Any questions for Danae?
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any testimony in support of this application? Is there any testimony in opposition of this application? Do we have any questions for staff? And you don't have anything more to say? All right. I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval, Core.
Second, Cornelius.
Any discussion?
Sure. If we look at the map of the proposed area, we see an area that's surrounded largely by residential and green space. It's unlikely that a neighborhood center will have significantly more impact on the area than a largish office development. I see no reason to oppose this, so I support the motion.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, and I think that this is the right thing to do. It's in a fairly new area, and will the neighborhood center is appropriate. Call the vote, please.
Okay, Cornelius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Sunderman?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay. Next item is change of zone. It's item 4.2, change of zone 15021, Victory Park planned unit plan, change of zone from P public use district to B2 planned unit development, O3 planned unit development, and R4 planned unit development on property generally located at the Veterans Administration Campus, 600 South 70th Street, for a planned unit development district designation of said property and for approval of a development plan which proposes waivers to Title 26 and Title 27 of the Lincoln Municipal Code with modifications to the zoning ordinance to design and construct a mixed-use development providing housing, medical offices and services, commercial and accessory services. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
I did meet, I had a meeting yesterday with Brad Carell on a number of different items, but this discussion did come up. It was more from the standpoint of understanding the relationship between Aging Partners and the Seniors Foundation and Veterans Administration.
Thank you.
Those-
Noted.
Ed Zimmer
Ed
from the
Zimmer.
Planning Department.
Thanks.
I'll briefly introduce this PUD. It's the next step in a large and complex process that you've, I think, had a good introduction to it last meeting through the redevelopment plan, which will come up for your action just after this item. The application requests 3 categories of zoning in the O2, B2, O3, and B4 and R4, and that reflects the mix of uses they will develop over a long period of time on this site. Up to 600 housing units in the final build-out, and office and commercial space as adjusted by this plan and as determined not by a cap but by the available space and available parking regulations as we're doing in other districts. This project includes, and the site plan includes, as we've shown before, considerable land and buildings that are set aside through the federal process of protecting the historic resources on this property. So while there are 60 acres involved, the developable property is considerably less than that. And so it's carefully set to the back of the campus to maintain the historic character, but also generate the necessary returns to support this property for the long-term lease that is involved here. There's a strong cast of folks to speak to you about this project. I'll mention that Danae will be presenting to you an amendment that to some of the specific language, and we're comfortable with that. We've worked it out, and it is part of our recommendation of approval as well, and will be available for your questions of staff.
Any questions for Ed? Thank you. Applicant?
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Corral. I work for Olson Associates here in Lincoln, and I'm here on behalf of the Seniors Foundation. I would like to introduce our development team so that you know who is in the audience today. Marianne Stallings is the president of the Seniors Foundation, and Tammy Ward, Tammy, raise your hand. Tammy is the director of the Seniors Foundation. Our lead developer is America First out of Omaha, Georgia Chola, and then in combination with America First is Sampson Construction. Craig Geese with Sampson is here today. Mark Palmer is engineer with Olson Associates and engineer for the project. Danae, of course, is our attorney. And then Duncan Fallon, not a member of the development team, but Duncan is the director of the medical campus, the VA campus in Lincoln, and Duncan is here as well. So I just wanted to introduce you to the team. For the last 85 years, the beautiful building that we all know as Vets Hospital has been the home for medical services for men and women who have served our country. Hundreds of thousands of veterans from Nebraska and Iowa have received mental and medical health care at the Lincoln VA Center. This year alone, over 15,000 veterans will make over 110,000 visits to this campus to receive medical care. But the day is near when that will no longer be the case. The old hospital was never designed to provide the scope of outpatient services needed by today's veterans. The VA has been planning for several years for a new state-of-the-art outpatient clinic for Lincoln. Funding has been approved and the search for a new site for a 100,000 square foot new clinic to be located within the city of limits is underway. Soon the main hospital and the companion buildings will no longer be in service by the VA. They will no longer serve the mission of the VA, and the VA does not have the funding to repurpose or maintain the buildings or the grounds. Without a plan, the existing buildings will go dark. Today, we bring before you a plan to keep the campus a vibrant and active part of the Lincoln community, a plan that preserves and respects the unique, historic, and iconic nature of the original buildings and the 59-acre campus. A plan to create a center that combines services for both veterans and seniors, two of the fastest growing segments of our society, so that they can live productive and healthy lives. A plan that envisions an investment of over $72 million in new and repurposed buildings and infrastructure. A plan that provides over 400 units of new housing for veterans and seniors, and a plan that will add significantly to the tax base while leveraging the city's current investment in infrastructure. Here are the main things that we would like you to know about the plan. First, it's complex. There are approximately a dozen government agencies who have been involved in this plan and have to sign off before we can complete the project. We have a very important construction commencement date of October 1st this year that we need to hit in order to preserve funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for veterans supportive housing. Very important date for us. Unlike many multifaceted projects that you see, our project will evolve in phases. While we would like to tell you today exactly what each phase looks like, when it will occur, and the order in which it will occur, we simply cannot give you all of those details. We simply don't know the answers to all those questions. We have a very good idea what phase one looks like, and we know what the end product will look like, but in terms of how the project will move forward and which parts of it will move faster than others, we can't give you all of that detail at this time. Tax increment financing is critical to the success of this project. When the VA moves out of the existing hospital, our development team assumes the full liability for the operations and maintenance of 175,000 square feet of building space and 59 acres of property. This represents a significant financial undertaking for our team. In addition, we'll spend over $2 million building infrastructure, streets, water mains, stormwater systems, public sidewalks, and lighting to serve the development. We have worked very hard to preserve the historical nature of the campus. We have worked closely with the VA, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office, the City of Lincoln, and the Preservation Association of Lincoln to enter into an agreement that will ensure the redevelopment respects and maintains the historic and iconic nature of the VA campus, and that will include new construction. We have worked closely with the neighbors and made a number of substantive changes based on input received. We have held 3 town hall meetings and had dozens of conversations to make sure we have addressed concerns as well as we possibly can. And we've also had backyard meetings with several of them, which you'll hear more about in a little bit. The federal legislation authorizing this type of development by the VA has expired. This may be the only meaningful opportunity for a campus-wide redevelopment of the VA property for many years. Finally, I just want to say publicly what an incredible job the team here at the city, led by Wynn Ermstad, has done in bringing this project forward. Ed Zimmer, Tim C., Dave Landis, Bob Simmering have all been patient and focused in guiding us through this process. A tremendous amount of work has been done. We still have quite a ways to go to hit our October 1st date, but I'd like Wynn and her team to know that we're very grateful for everything that they've done. With that, I would like to ask George Achola to come forward on behalf of America First and visit about a little bit more about the development. George?
George Achola, America First Real Estate Group, 1004 Farnham Street, Omaha, Nebraska. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about us and our commitment to this development. We are a national development company based out of Omaha. We've developed, owned, and managed property in 38 states across the country. We have significant experience in developing affordable housing, market rate housing, student housing. I know the 50-50 initiative, some of you may have been involved in some of that. We were the developer on that project. And we're also very highly involved in military housing and veterans housing. We redid the military housing in Bellevue, and we also did what we call an award, has been called an award-winning project in Omaha for veterans, similar to the type of facility we want to construct on this VA campus. This project really is the type of project that we seek to do because it involves extensive partnerships with various different entities that bring different experiences, different resources, and different abilities to the table. I think that the city of Lincoln is going to benefit tremendously, as Brad has outlined in his presentation, from this project. But most importantly, I think that the thing that we also need to focus on is that even though the VA is leaving, at some point may leave that campus in its old form, we're hoping that they stay there in some capacity. But the important thing for us is the folks that that campus was dedicated for is going to continue to be our primary focus, and that is the veterans. So I want you to take that piece away, that the scope of that location, while it's going to change, the primary focus is going to remain making sure that it's there for those folks that earned the right to call it, their place. So, thank you.
We held our first town hall meeting on June the 16th. We had, I think, probably around 100. Well, we had two meetings that day. One was with veterans and then a second meeting with neighbors. And I'm guessing we had probably over 100 neighbors and related parties come. Based on input that we received, there were three main overriding issues in that meeting. One, it was the placement of the VASH housing, which we had in the southeast corner. The neighbors felt that it was too close and it did not provide adequate transition from the residential onto the campus. The second was the buffer zone between the neighbors along the south edge of the campus and the commercial parking and medical office buildings. And then the third was addressing the drainage, the stormwater runoff that just about everybody in Lincoln is concerned with these days. We've had subsequent meetings. We've made substantive changes in the design plan based on those meetings, and I'd like to ask Craig Geese to come forward. And Craig has sort of spearheaded our public engagement process, and I'd like him to share with you the comments that we've received.
Thank you, Brad. My name is Craig Geese, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about where this process has gone.
Could you give us your address, please?
Sure. 4400 Lowell Avenue, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Thank you.
We've been working on the project for a number of years with the Seniors Foundation, and the one thing that we've seen is just the community involvement and how people have been excited about what might happen on the campus, whether there's a concern over how the veterans are being able to maintain, a state and a location for the campus as being an important element. We've continued to keep that in mind. And as soon as plans were available, as soon as we were to a point where there was things with our negotiations with Washington, we started having these town hall meetings. We started to share what the plans look like. And as Brad shared with you already, that we had some adjustments that we made to the plan based on what the neighbors had. We actually had, we had a first town hall meeting. We asked everybody to indicate their concerns, write their questions down. We responded to each and every one of the questions. The Seniors Foundation has put it on their website. Duncan and their people at the VA have also posted those kinds of responses, so they've been able to see what the outcome has been. But we also asked them, a number of them were raised their concern over their backyard. Looking out the backyard, they no longer have the green space, the trees that they've always had. What does it look like from their side of the fence? So I asked for all of those people that in those meetings that had a concern to write down their name. And I went over and I looked at each one of their backyards and looked at what their concerns were, that asked and put their name down there. And it was obvious in a sense that the elevation we were going to have and how that Vash housing was stuck in the corner was a concern, a legitimate one. How the water, while it was draining today, was a concern for them. How were we going to handle that and be sure it was being addressed? The buffer zones that were allowed by the zoning might have been enough, but we extended those a little bit farther to try and save as many of the trees along that side as we could. So the current PUD that's out there now, the plans indicated on there, have taken that into account. The second physical town hall meeting with the neighbors, the folks that were kind of on the south and the east portion of the property were much more comfortable with the adjustments, but the people on the south by themselves were concerned that how is that medical office building going to be blocking the views, how many trees come down. So we've since done a section showing what the elevations are going to be, the fact that the building sits lower, the ground floor of the building sits lower than where their current backyard is. They can see how, while they don't necessarily see completely over the building, it's not the big billboard that's going to stick right in their backyard and the buffer that's going to be there. So we've tried to anticipate and incorporate the things and the concerns that the neighbors have had with it. There's no doubt it's not the green space that existed before. The comments with regard to the numbers of trees that would be removed or the wildlife that's going to be disturbed, those things are a part of what's going to happen. We want to be as sensitive as we can to it, and that's what our plan's trying to show. So far, while not everybody, we've always said we're not all going to agree at every component of it, but I think we've tried to be sensitive to it, and I think there's been civil discussions between both parties there. So,
Thank you.
Did you bring any of the pictures where you showed the elevation and how it was going to look from the neighbor's viewpoint?
Did you bring that with? Yeah. You can show it. Go ahead and show maybe the bottom cut section through there. While the building hasn't been designed specifically, maybe take the lower one. On this bottom part of the sheet, it indicates where the houses would set in the elevation. It's approximately about 8 feet down. Is that right, Mark?
And we're about a 75 to a 68, so
7 feet down from what the backyard elevation is. And the slopes do change from east to west as you come across the site. But he taken a section there at that point, and it shows then the parking. There were some concerns over not having a large parking lot, not having lights shining in the backyard. So the parking area actually points away from the neighbors in that direction. And showing the elevation, the 40-foot buffer where no construction is going to occur, and then extending the parking lot itself such that the building's about 100 feet or so away from the back of the neighbors. We understand is a concern. We're saying that that's the closest we're going to place the building. If the actual configuration of the building moves slightly to the north, that would only be a benefit to the neighbors. Frankly, that's the second of the two buildings that would occur and has the greatest blockage. So hopefully that kind of answers, and that's been shared with the three that were right behind it that had the greatest concern.
Other questions? Thank you.
Kalkowski, 1111 Lincoln Mall, Suite 350. As Ed mentioned, we've got just a few items to clean up on the conditions for approval, and so I just want to briefly go through those with you real quickly. We were able to meet with staff and go over these changes, and we've showed them to them ahead of time, and I think everybody's on the same page, but it allows us to maybe just clarify a few of the items. The first one is note 1.2. We just basically changed that wording to reflect the fact that Outlot A is going to be constructed as a public street to the satisfaction of Public Works and Utilities. Public Works actually has a little bit of flexibility on those standards for a public street. So by changing the wording around a little bit, it just allows us to say we're going to build a public street, but allows us a little flexibility on the standards if we can work it out with Public Works while that's being constructed. Item 1.3 was a request to provide a landscape plan before we start any construction out here. We're just changing that to show that that landscape plan will be for the perimeter, which is primarily the area, that the neighbors are concerned about. So it'll show the setbacks and the screening within that perimeter area. And then as we come through with individual building permits for more of the interior site, the landscaping plans for those, individual buildings will be provided at that time, which is pretty standard. The next change really is 1.5 and also 1.15. These two notes deal with signage on the property. So one of the 1.5 deals with notes on the site plan, and 1.15 deals with the PUD notes, but they really go toward the same item. There are two existing center identification signs along O Street at the two main entrances into the campus. We want to be able to maintain two center identification signs. So the change on note 1.5 just says identify those two signs so that they are identified on the plan. And then the rest of the wording in both 1.5 and 1.15 says all additional signing then would comply with the Lincoln Municipal Code, sign ordinance 2769.
Those signs are along 70th?
Typically under the zoning ordinance, we'd only be allowed one center ID
No,
sign.
They're along 70th?
Yes, along
I think you said
70th Street.
O Street.
Oh, sorry. Yes, along 70th Street.
Thanks.
Danae, can you tell me, it looked, and you might not know exactly, but that Outlot A, is that pretty much just the circular drive that's there now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The only other change is to 1.14, and that was just simply a little clarification. There was a typo on which provision of the PUD notes we were amending for parking. It was 3C and not 3B. So I think most of those really were just for clarification purpose. Probably the one of substance is just to make sure that we're allowed those two center ID signs on 70th Street at the main access points. And I think unless you have any specific questions regarding the amendments, the whole team is available for any questions you might have on the project as a whole.
Any questions? Is that?
I have a staff question.
Okay. Brad, you want to wrap things up, or you? Okay, thank you. Should we bring folks in support and then in opposition first, and then we'll go back to staff? Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in support of this matter? Is there anyone here wishing to testify in opposition to this item? Now, staff.
I was just wondering about the public process for the neighbors. It says the plan is largely conceptual, so if there's something that comes down the road and neighbors want to appear, will this be coming back to us, or will they be able to appear before the council to talk about what's to come down the line?
I think this sets the broad framework. Some of the future changes or some of the future development, I think, could be handled administratively. If they're more substantive than the framework you've seen here, then I assume that would come into a public hearing process. So it would depend upon, I think, the substance of the, how substantial a change was to what we see here as conceptual plan.
Okay, so today really is the day to appear.
This, of course, goes on to the city council as well.
Yeah.
I think I've attended the public meetings, the town hall meetings as well. And I think the diminution of comment is probably a comment in itself. I don't think, if there hadn't been those robust public meetings, I wouldn't say that. But I think that is an indication.
Thank you.
And so are you saying from your attendance at these meetings that compromise was reached and both sides are pretty happy with the outcome?
Certainly, I think we can say that substantial changes were made in that original plan, and I think the tenor of the second meeting reflected that. We've also, the redevelopment agreement, redevelopment plan, had the airing before the Historic Preservation Commission as well. So this is going through substantial process and then goes on to City Council as well. But there certainly were significant adjustments from that first plan to the second and the one that's before you and the one that's in your redevelopment plan. I wouldn't speak for 100 neighbors, but I did hear them speak.
Other questions? Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that concludes our input. We're grateful for your time today, and if there are questions, we've got our team here that will try and answer.
Any questions for Brad? I guess the only suggestion, being a veteran myself, I guess I would maybe suggest that Aging Partners and the Seniors Foundation consider putting veterans on their board to make sure that you have the veterans flavor for this as you continue to move forward.
Chairman Hove, I learned today that I think we have 3 veterans existing on our board. Marianne, you want to come up and speak to that?
Yes, we have 3 veterans on our board of directors. We have one who just resigned because he decided to retire and move to Texas, and that was Gary Chalupa. And we also have Roger Lemke, who's interested in coming onto the board in a couple of months. So, and it was also back in 2011 that a veteran did come forward to our board and ask us to consider this enhanced use lease because he saw it as a way for Aging Partners Seniors Foundation to team up with the veterans to provide more services and to provide more programs. So,
thank you.
any other questions?
Nope. I think, unless there's no more questions, thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second, Sunderman.
Thunderman. Discussion? Well, I think this is a good use of the facility. The zoning changes make sense, and I plan to support this.
I do have a couple comments. I appreciate the team working with the neighbors on this and being willing to move some things around to accommodate them. I think that's really important. I am a little bit nervous on all the unknowns, but I'm trusting everybody involved here. I do want to kind of pitch a couple of ideas to you guys, though. Maybe get a neighbor that lives back in that area on your board as well, so that you can kind of have a go-between or a liaison between those two groups. And probably my biggest concern about this is I want to make sure that these are upkept, because I think a large problem of why the hospital is in such bad shape right now is because maintenance hasn't been done for so many years. And so please be diligent on keeping up your maintenance, and so that we can extend the life of these buildings as long as we can.
Thank you. Anything else?
I would just say, I asked about the neighbors, and I think this sounds like a great project and a needed one. I would just encourage, if anyone's watching, a neighbor is watching this today and has any concern, that they still have an opportunity to speak before the council.
Thank you. Jerry, call the vote, please. Oh,
The question, as I heard the motion, I did not hear the word amendment.
as amended.
Right.
As amended.
Good call, Ed.
Clarify as amended, the suggested amendment by the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We call the
And they accepted.
amendment first separately, and then we'll do the main motion as amended.
I think if the motion and the second are accept that friendly amendment, then we can just call the motion as
Okay.
is.
Okay, so this is for change of zone 15021 as amended. I have the motion being made by Harris and seconded by Sunderman. Cornelius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Sunderman?
Yes.
Weber? Yes. Hove?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay. And that would be as amended. Okay, the next item is, well, first of all, I want to note that the public hearing and action on this item was continued from the July 22nd meeting to ensure that the public notification requirements were met. It's Comprehensive Plan Conformance Number 15010 to review the proposed VA campus redevelopment plan as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln-Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan and the State of Nebraska's Community Development Plan, generally located at 600 South 70th Street. Staff recommendation is conformance with the comprehensive plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
I see none. Ed?
I think nothing has changed from 2 weeks ago, so we're just available for your questions.
Any questions for Ed? Thank you. Is there anyone here wishing to testify in support of this item? Is there anyone here wishing to testify in opposition to this item?
My name is Richard Halverson, 6311 Inverness Road here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and not opposition per se, well, but I have several questions. Well, I was kind of surprised the Seniors Foundation is overseeing this. So I guess, what is their resume? I checked out some of the records last year. Last year they had on the website, they brought in like less than $50,000 in contributions. So how's an organization that evidently doesn't have to go oversee this $7 million, was it more, $72 million project, a small organization that has an endowment less than $500,000. I guess, what are their qualifications for, again, going from that to overseeing a $72 million project? And another two, I noticed on the sketch I have here, the four brick buildings to the northwest, they don't have a use shown on the sketch. Well, I received from, I think, somewhere, I think maybe Congressman's office. They don't show a use for those. I think they were nurses' quarters or officers' quarters, and they're probably offices now, but they don't show a use for those in the plan. So that means they're coming down, or they're just not sure yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in opposition to this item? Would bring the applicant up to comment on those questions.
In regard to the first question about the Seniors Foundation's resources, the observation is correct. The Seniors Foundation's resources are limited. They are not a real estate developer. That's why they've selected America First. You've heard their credentials from America First. And basically in the agreement, America First backstops the Seniors Foundation from liability and will take on the primary role of performance under the enhanced use lease. So the VA is really looking through Seniors Foundation to America First as the developer to carry out this project. Secondly, good question on the 4 buildings. Those are all historic buildings. They're on the Historic Register of Deeds. No, we will not be taking any of those down. The exact use of those, we're not exactly sure. Today, the Seniors Foundation's office is in one building, and then the bigger building is currently used for Veterans Benefit Administration offices. That building has been remodeled and could be office space. Basically, these buildings are not, they were built as quarters, 3 levels. They're not ADA accessible. They will require quite a bit of work. We are hopeful that maybe the smallest of those buildings could be a museum for veterans. We're going to have to raise patient money to make that happen. The other 2 buildings could possibly be retrofitted back into quarters or living units if somebody would like to do that. Or the other option we've considered is retrofitting them so that they would be serviceable for nonprofit organizations, small nonprofits that might be able to come on the campus and be a part of the complement of services that we hope to offer long run. So the 4 buildings will stay.
Thank you. Any questions for Brad? Thank you. I kind of went out of line. Staff, do we have any questions for staff? And any other questions for the applicant? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval. Sure. Second, Weber.
Discussion?
Sure. In a little bit, the logistics of the agenda mean that we put something ahead of this that kind of implies this approval that we're about to make. So to some extent, this is a formality. We heard extensive briefing on this 2 weeks ago, and this was a continuation and was for new information only. I still intend to support this as I did the previous application.
Anything else? I think this is conforms to the comprehensive plan, and I intend to support it. Call the vote, please.
Cornelius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Sunderman?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. If not, we're adjourned. We will take a 5-minute break and then start the wind energy rules and regulations hearing.